Hello, hello, and welcome to another forecast. We are looking at the full moon in Aries. So we're in a changing eclipse cycle, and that means that every 18 months the nodes, that this is the south node in Libra, and exactly opposite it we have the north node in Aries. Wherever the nodes are, which are basically points, not planets, they're points in the sky that dictate, depending on the spin of the Earth's orbit at that time, where the eclipses will fall. And eclipses are basically when we either have sun, moon, Earth, or sun, Earth, moon. And that's where we will have eclipses. And those points at which that happens, that alignment happens, is dependent on the nodes. And the nodes have an 18-year cycle. And every 18 months or so, they change the pair of signs, the axis of signs that they're on. They move backwards, always move backwards, and they change signs. So therefore, we will be having eclipses in, and what we've been dealing with our eclipses in for the last little while is Aries and Libra. But at the time where it's starting to shift towards a changeover, we will often have eclipses as we are in this season where it's not opposites. So our last new moon was the Libra eclipse. Theoretically, the opposite sign being Aries, when we have our Aries full moon, that would be an eclipse. And the last time Aries had his new moon cycle earlier in the year was I think it was the 8th of April. That was our total eclipse of the year. But this full moon is not an eclipse, because you may remember that the previous full moon, which was in a different pair of signs, was in Pisces, that was an eclipse. So what's happening now is we are moving from the eclipse axis being Aries Libra into the eclipse axis being Virgo Pisces. So this particular eclipse season is one Pisces and one Libra eclipse. And I think that's the next one works that way as well. So basically we're in the shifting sands. And this is actually the lunation, this one that we're looking at now, this Aries new moon, full moon, is the lunation that ends the eclipse season, but is not an eclipse. However, the last time we had a big Aries lunation, the last few times, in fact, they were eclipses. So there's still quite a strong intensity to the feel of this full moon. And anyway, full moon's always somewhat intense, but a little extra because it's so linked to the eclipse cycle, even if it is not itself an eclipse. Now, if you watched my last forecast in Libra, there was a lot of beautiful, graceful blue lines, a grand trine, and some beautiful blue. There's beautiful blue in this one as well, but you can also see a lot more red. So I quite like that, because Libra is a Venus ruled sign, and it's all about beauty and grace and harmony, and that's sort of sung in that Libra eclipse chart that we did 2 weeks before this full moon. And then we get to this Mars ruled Aries full moon, and there's a lot more like warrior, like we've got to fight for what we believe in kind of energy. Fighting is how we get what we want, where Libra has a different feeling about how to get what you want. So I just feel like even if you just look at the center of this chart and you go back and you look at the center of the previous chart where the aspect patterns are forming with the planets speaking to each other, already for me that speaks, it has a resonance that says quite a lot. So you don't have to understand the astrology on your own to kind of look at the shapes and connections and ask yourself, what does that make me feel? In fact, let me flip back to that chart. I do have it open. Let me flip back to it so you can see it. So this is the new moon, 2 weeks prior to this Aries full moon. And you can see this is a lot more simple and elegant. If you look at that, what does it make you feel? Look at the lines. Yes, there's a red line, sure, a couple of dots, but look how clean, simple, graceful that is. And just ask yourself how that feels as opposed to that. Now, I'm crazy like that. I like them all because I feel like whatever we find in these, it's like such a grand design that for me it's magical and it's perfect in whatever it is. But when we have more of this red dynamic tension, sometimes how it can be experienced in our 3D reality is not very comfortable or not very easy, or being pushed or challenged or pressurized to make some kind of change in our life. Again, for me, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't always feel great in the moment, but ultimately it is for our good. So, and again, we can choose to ignore those feelings and we can carry on with our kind of mundane way of getting on with our lives. But at some point, one of these kind of challenging moments in our life arises that makes us go, you know what? Maybe I could have done this last week, last year, a decade ago, whatever, I'm ready now. And this could be such a chart that says, I'm ready now. We have the sun at 24 degrees of Libra, and we have the moon at 24 degrees of Aries opposite it. And you can see that that dark red line is thicker because they are exactly opposite each other, which is what a full moon is. It is the sun opposite the moon. So it's always exact, okay? Now, this is in the last decan of the sign, so the last 10 degrees. So you're going to look if you have any planets or points in the last 10 degrees of any of the cardinal signs, being Aries, and we have got, this is where we're actually having this cardinal cross, but we'll talk about that now. Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn. Okay, those are the cardinal signs. If you have anything in the late degrees of the cardinal signs, or even the first degree or so of the fixed signs, that would be more this lunation will be more felt by you, shall we say. Okay, so now because we have this opposition of sun and moon, which is normal at this time of year, and we have the moon squaring Mars, which is also squaring the sun, which is also squaring Pluto, which is also squaring the moon. You can see this big old square, all in cardinal signs. So this is also, we're right at the end of the cycle of Pluto in Capricorn. I mean, you've heard this, if you watch astrology, you've been hearing this for the last few years already. If you listen just to me, you've probably been hearing me hammering on about this, but it's a big deal because Pluto entered into Capricorn in 2008, and he's only exiting fully in November this year. He's been slowly but surely egging his way into Aquarius, back and forthing over that line between those two archetypes, Capricorn, Aquarius. And by November this year, when he gets out of Capricorn, that is it for another 250 plus years. So that is a very long time. We certainly won't see that in our lifetimes, that Pluto will come and do the work in this archetype again. So in these next few full moons and new moons, and I believe that the full moon after this, the Taurus full moon, I think, is the final full moon where Capricorn will be in the final 5 minutes of the sign of Cap, when Pluto will be in the final 5 minutes of the sign of Capricorn. So anytime we're working with a final degree, we really like feeling the intensity of it. And I want to remind you that in the next few years, not only do we have this powerful transformative Pluto making the shift into another sign, which is no small thing, it doesn't happen often. We also have Neptune slowly beginning next year, beginning the shift as well. I also want to just point out that at this lunation, Pluto has just gone direct, okay? Neptune is still retrograde here, but next year I think it is that Neptune begins, it's either 25 or 26, begins his move out of Pisces. So he's also going to dance across that line for the next few years. And the same thing with Uranus, who will also begin that shift into Gemini next year. I think these two both begin their move next year. So this is a really big deal. And I've spoken about this before, how they're actually forming a supportive connection to each other. We have Pluto sextile to Neptune, sextile to Uranus, and Uranus and Pluto trining. And I spoke about this at least in the last reading and maybe before, but for me, it feels like they're kind of holding us, cradling us. These big outer planets that are saying, listen, things have got to shift. This is how humanity progresses. It's do or die. We know you've got a lot going on. So we're going to work together in harmony, Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus, to support and facilitate your change. You'll see the thumbnail image that I used for this is very much this net. And the reason it's even more intense, that feeling of that net that I'm referring to in this lunation, is because you can see here, so we've got this long line here and then two shorter lines, and it forms this pretty little triangle, which we could see more easily here, okay, in last in 2 weeks ago's lunation, last lunation. Now, you see, you still have that. Here it is here. But you also have a sextile from Pluto to Venus at the end of Scorpio. And this is a bit darker, this line. Can you see that? Thicker. So it's a stronger, closer connection. So Venus in Scorpio is sextile Pluto in Capricorn and forming another one of those pretty little supportive net like cradles. And then we have Uranus forming a sextile to Mars and Mars forming a trine to Neptune. So again, another one. So here we have 1, 2, 3 of these beautiful little cradles interweaving like a mesh or a web and holding us. And the 2 planets that have added themselves to the mix of this particular one are the planet that was ruling the last eclipse, Venus, in her fierce role in Scorpio, which she's about to leave, and Mars in his nurturing position in Cancer, not his comfortable zone. Neither of them are terribly comfortable here, but where he's in this Cancer space, learning how to be nurturing and self-nourishing and compassionate of others. And so they are, and he's the ruler of this full moon, because Mars rules Aries, right? So we've got this beautiful outer planet support where we've added the planet that represents the masculine, Mars, and the planet that represents the feminine, Venus. And this is very much our last eclipse was very much about what are the imbalances within the relational dynamic. How do we redress the balance in our relationships, in our intimate relationships, in our friendships, etc. And here we are at the full moon, where in Aries, which is very much about like, now me, Aries, need to look at myself, and I need to say, if I want to be the best person I can be in my relationships, it's an inside job. So as good as I am in my relationship with me and understanding me, the better I can be in my relationships with others. And I want to point out that this full moon, is also conjunct Chiron. And Chiron is the wound. It's the wounded healer archetype. So there's so much about Chiron. I'm just going to try and keep it a bit more simple, and I won't go into the myth of Chiron. I'm sure I've spoken about that numerous times before, but basically Chiron is a teacher and a healer, and he is wounded, and even though he's immortal, this wound was poisonous. The arrow was poisoned, and he can't fully heal this wound, even though he is a renowned healer. And so through this continual pain and continual nursing of the thing, he grows a level of compassion and awareness that he can help to heal others with similar wounds, in spite of the fact that he can't heal his. And I think that's also for all of us. Whatever experiences we've gone through, they give us a level of compassion that means we can support other people. For example, a few years ago, before I'd gone through a divorce, I would be less able to support people that have gone or are going through divorce, because I couldn't have personally understood it the way that I now can. So whatever we have experienced in our life gives us the capacity to go there and be available to other people's pain, because we've experienced that pain. And so it's a little bit, it's a challenging thing, but also beautiful, because the ability to hold space, and I come back to that beautiful space holding energy that we have in this chart, the ability to hold space for someone while they go through grief and loss and all the things, and the ability to be held by somebody who can hold space well is, if you experience that, if you've had that, you know the difference between being around people. Have you ever had a period where you're very, very heartbroken, or you're just like, you feel like you're having your own breakdown, and the people around you are so uncomfortable with your pain that you want to put your pain back in the box? You don't want to let them see your pain, because it's hard enough for you to have your pain, but they are so uncomfortable, it's making you even more uncomfortable, and you want to bottle it up, shield up, guard up. Whereas, have you ever sat with someone who, when you're completely at the depths of it, that person just sits beside you and holds your hand? They don't try to fix it, because it's not something that can be fixed. It has to be felt through. They don't try to judge you, or they're not uncomfortable sitting with your pain because they've known pain. And so they can sit there quietly and cry quietly beside you, or sit silently beside you and just be there with you. That is a completely different thing. That allows you to fully express your grief, your pain, your loss, knowing that that person can hold that pain. And the person who has gone to those depths is the person who can hold that pain. And really, the invitation for all of us in the last few years has been to do the work on yourself, that you can go into the depths of yourself, that you can let yourself drop into the deepest pains and challenges and turmoils that there are in your life, even if that means sometimes going back to uncover where you buried stuff, because we're really good at that, so that you are more able to bring the fullness of you, the depth of you, the compassion within you to the world. And here we have this moon Chiron conjunction. So and Aries is me. Remember that Aries is the original spark of light. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. So the lesson here is, if I can do that in myself, if I can be so deeply self-reflective that I can sit and hold everybody's stuff that comes my way, that's where I've achieved this kind of like mastery of myself. But I need to be a pioneer, which luckily Aries is a pioneering energy. I need to be a pioneer of uncovering me. And I'm only responsible for doing that with me. Just as you're only responsible for doing that with you, your child is only responsible for them, and so on and so forth. Your partner, your whatever. And this is also where we go wrong. We put all these expectations of other people to fill our holes. We all do it, and to be something to us. And we put pressure on ourselves to be so many things for so many people, and we forget to do the self work. And then because we haven't done our own self work and we've got all these holes that we haven't filled, then we expect that to be filled by other people in our life. Why are my friends not making me feel better all the time? Why is it such a quick fix when I had that 5-minute conversation? Why is my romantic partner not able to fulfill every one of my needs? Why are my children not making me feel complete and fulfilled? Like that's the thing. None of those things will completely fulfill us if we are not filling ourselves and fulfilling ourselves. And this is a big lesson in general, but it seems really to be singing in this chart for me as well. Because even though the new moon was very much in the Libra sign of the relational dynamic, and remember, conjunct in that time, Black Moon Lilith, we're still, if we're dealing with a full moon, we've got the moon in Aries, but it's opposite the sun in Libra. So it's like I need to reflect on how to be in relationship. And the only way I can be in relationship well is if I'm doing that from deep self-care. And then remembering we have this big old squarey energy here, this cardinal cross. And that is saying there's a power dynamic and a transformational dynamic and an intensity and a depth. Pluto is like the lord of the underworld, that needs to be taken at 29 degrees of Capricorn. Capricorn has quite a top-down power ideal. So a lot of this is like, now look at yourself within that relational dynamic and ask yourself, do I have to always be in control? Do I have to always be the boss or in charge? What if I didn't? What if we met shoulder to shoulder? How would that work? And also, am I always the underling? Am I always being squashed? Am I always being dismissed and diminished? What if I didn't allow that? What if we met shoulder to shoulder? So that dynamic is coming through very strongly with the Pluto squaring this situation. And then, of course, with Mars squaring in the sign of Cancer, and sort of mentioned into this with the last new moon, is that Mars is actually as not comfortable as he is really in Cancer, because Cancer is making him kind of slow down and be a little bit too sensitive and mushy for his natural liking. Remember, he's also ruling this full moon. And he's going to be doing a retrograde. He's going to get into Leo and then move back into Cancer. So he's going to spend a really long time working on this Cancer stuff, which gives us more time to look at how to be more compassionate in the way we do things. Because Mars is how we get what we want, how we take action, where our drive comes from. And if we were looking at our drive in Cancer, it's like I am driven to change these power structures, to change these relational dynamics, to change my relationship with myself, to be more nurturing of myself, to be more nurturing of the other, even if that means I have to change things. Even if that means if I'm always on top, I now need to be on the bottom, or I was always on the bottom, now I need to be on the top. And I'm talking about in a power hierarchy, but I just want to bring you back to where I mentioned Lilith at the last new moon, and that was the new moon that's initiated this cycle. So we're still in the cycle of the Libra new moon whilst we experience this full moon. And that cycle the new moon was conjunct Black Moon Lilith, and the myth of Lilith is in the previous video if you want to go back and listen to it more fully. Suffice to say, the reason Lilith left Eden and Adam was because literally in a sexual dynamic, she did not want to always have to be on the bottom while he had power over her. And that was her resistance. That didn't feel fair. That didn't feel balanced. That didn't feel good to her. She didn't feel good. And in a relational dynamic, in a sexual relational dynamic, it's supposed to feel good for both parties. And that's, again, part of this story. So, yeah, I think, is there anything else? Oh, there's also Jupiter, who wasn't too present in the last new moon, has got a lovely trine going with the sun. So he's really getting supportive, and a sextile with the moon. So you can see he's also really dancing this dance with this chart that he's saying, yes, go there, do those things. I'll bring my generous, exuberant, larger than life self to this conversation, which is really lovely. And then, no, we've talked about all of that. I think I'm going to leave it at that. We didn't talk much about Mercury, and he is forming a wide square to Pluto. But I think I'm going to leave Mercury alone for now. He's in Scorpio at the moment, and he's having a bit of a deep dive into his thoughts. But I think he's not as present, just like Jupiter wasn't as present in the last reading. There's lots of ways we could bring him in with more curiosity, but to keep these relatively short, I'm going to leave him out of this dynamic. So thank you so much for watching. Please remember, likes, shares, follows, subscribes, all help for me to get that algorithm going, and I really appreciate them. I hope you have a wonderful full moon. I am an Aries moon, so I always find that the Aries moons have got big insights for me. So you may want to look at what is your moon sign, and that will be more powerful for you because you only have one full moon in your moon sign per year, almost always. Not always. Remember, we had 2 Capricorn full moons this year, but normally one full moon in your sign every year, one new moon in your sign every year, and those are very extra powerful for you. So yeah, look at your moon and figure that out as you follow along with these forecasts. Thanks again for watching.